Welcome to Doc NYC's Spring Showcase, our mid-year celebration of documentary films and series. My name is Samah Ali, and I am a senior programmer for Shorts and Doc NYCU. And it is my pleasure to be speaking with Bao Nguyen, who is the director of Netflix's The Greatest Night in Pop. Hi, Bao.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming in today, and I'm in such a privileged position to be asking all of the questions that I'm sure many viewers are curious about. Starting with, how did you get involved in this documentary?
Um, well, it's sort of a long story. I'll try to keep it short. I was working with my producer, Julia Nottingham. She produced my previous film, Be Water. And this was kind of the beginning, middle stages of the pandemic, late 2020. We were just trying to figure out what we were going to work on next. Be Water had sort of finished its run, and we were unsure of what the world would look like after COVID. There was a lot of, things that we, wanted to imagine, but we couldn't imagine. And we were wondering like what things we were watching at that time. I was watching a lot of things from the 80s and the early 90s. And we were also thinking like maybe archival film is the best way to go since we didn't know when we were going to start shooting. Uh, and my producer, Julia, just said, based on sort of those parameters, you know the song We Are the World. And of course, I know the song. I was only 2 years old when the song came out, though. So I didn't know how big the song was when it came out. Obviously, since I know about it decades later, it was a huge hit, something that we all kind of learn and know the chorus of. But I didn't know the story at all. And if you asked me 30 years ago if I knew I was going to make a We Are the World film, I'd be like, "What are you talking about?" It doesn't seem like something that would be like on the top of my list. But when I started doing research about the actual night of and how it was made all in one night, it really started to resonate with me more. And I thought, like, I can bring something interesting to the story and not make it just sort of a conventional, making of a song documentary. I saw the elements of a heist film. I saw the elements of this like ticking time bomb, this cliffhanger that really attracted me to the story, not just the song. But I was still constantly thinking, am I the best person to tell a story? Can I listen to the song over and over again? I would have to listen to it so many times in the edit. Can you make a film about one song? Like, can it sustain an entire feature length documentary? And I was still wrestling with these questions when I went to go visit my family in Vietnam. I got into a taxi cab, and my taxi cab driver, who was like in his 70s, spoke zero English. He put on a mix CD, and the first song that played was "We Are the World,"
Oh
and
my
that
God.
was just like a sign, from the documentary gods that I had to do this film, and so that's how I got involved with this project.
Well, what a unique story, and I love the signs. I'm a huge sign person. Also, this is such a legendary song. So many people know the song. So many people know where they were when it released, all the stakes that were leading up to it, and then of course the remake 25 years later or 20 years later. It's such a privilege for us to see everything that you saw behind the scenes. But I also want to know, how much footage did you have to work with when making the project?
Well, I think as many documentary filmmakers will know, when we're promised archival footage, we're expecting the world. And Julia had originally, and myself too, thought there'd be like tens of hours of footage because they
Mhm.
had cameras rolling nonstop. They had four cameras, and yeah, they had shot it originally for the music video and for this TV special that kind of came out right when the song was released. So we were like, there must be all this raw footage. And let me take a step back really quick though, is like how we found the footage, because Julie and I had never worked on a music doc together. So we're just like, we have no connection to Lionel Richie, we have no connection to the Michael Jackson estate. How are we even going to start looking for this archival? And we happened to be working with MRC, and MRC owned Dick Clark Productions at that time. And
Mhm,
Jake Clark Productions produced the American Music Awards, which was a pivotal part of the story.
mhm.
And so MRC was like, "Oh, you should call this guy Larry Klein. He used to produce the American Music Awards." So Julia cold calls Larry. Larry is living in Turks and Caicos, as producers of the '80s do, and she basically, cold calls him, gives him an elevator pitch of the film, and he says, "I've been waiting 35 years for this phone call." So that was another serendipitous moment in the process of making this film. And he connected us with Lionel, with the Michael Jackson estate, and most importantly with USA for Africa, who owned all the footage and the rights to the song. And we contact USA for Africa. They had the footage just all over the place. It was kind of hard. They didn't think that someone was going to make a film 40 years later, and so they didn't sort of have the initiative to store this footage to kind of keep it in safekeeping. And so we had to kind of like look for the footage everywhere. There was footage, there was like tapes, literal tapes in the back of someone's like car in their trunk that's been sitting there for like 20 years. And what was, a larger number of hours that I thought I was working with became single digits. And in the documentary world, or and especially in the documentary world, to make a feature length film, it's usually like a 100 to 1 ratio of like 100 hours of footage to like 1 hour of actual time that's on screen. So we had a lot less that we were working with.
Wow, single digits. Well, what a story. You're just full of stories. I love this. Oh my God. Wow. So much to go off of from there. I mean, knowing that you had such little footage rather than a wealth to go with, how were you able to build a story with what you had?
Yeah, originally when I thought I had tens of hours of archival, I really wanted it to be sort of this like fly on the wall, like Get Back, Mazel's Brothers, like very observational of just the night itself. Um, but you know, running into this challenge, and I tried to transform the challenge into an opportunity. It just gave me a way to creatively pivot. We were like leaning on the actual process to the night of, and that became part of the film. That's sort of like the first third of the film now. Um, but another challenge is that we had really no footage in archival of the lead up, and so what we did have were these amazing archival audio tapes from David Breskin. David Breskin was a Life magazine journalist who was assigned to cover the recording. Um,
Wow.
and a month before the recording, he basically has this dictaphone and records like every single conversation, every single phone call that he has, and that gave us this rich texture that helped us make the beginning of the film. But audio was not enough to make a film, a documentary film, which is rely on the visual. So we actually recreated a lot of footage that was in the vein and the style of the archival of the recording. The night of the recording, that archival was very much the visual foundation for the film, and using that to inspire how we would shoot the recreation scene. And just to give more logistical challenges to my producer, I was very adamant that we shot on the exact same cameras that they shot the recording night on. And
Whoa.
so we had it was definitely a pain in the ass to kind of find those exact cameras, not just like finding out which cameras, because that was like almost 40 years ago. No one remembered exactly what cameras they were, and then trying to source those cameras, finding working cameras in Los Angeles where we shot the recreations was a big challenge. But I think it helped create that immersion that was really important for me and for our team, to make sure that everyone felt like they were in the process in 1985, like in Los Angeles, and it kept the sort of dramatic propulsion of the story going, and again this sense of a ticking time bomb.
Wow. This is so good. So much to work through, especially the camera decision. So How did you, I mean, it's an older camera, so were you using film for this project?
No, luckily, I mean, I think my producer would have been like, "No, we're just gonna shoot it on like, an Ari or Sony, and then grade it later if they shot on film." I mean, one part of me wish they shot on film because then the footage of the recording studio would have been like really filmic and cinematic.
Yeah.
But there's a certain aesthetic and texture. They shot on like VHS and beta, and so that's definitely a vibe of the '80s. So we just had to source those type of tapes when we were doing the recreation.
Cool, cool. I want to talk about music because this is a music doc. um, how did you clear the rights for this project? Because so many voices, legendary song. Where did you begin?
You hire a very good music supervisor. So Gary Welsh was our music supervisor, and I mean, I knew going into the production process that we had to have a pretty good line item for music, just because you have all these great stars, these musical icons. And to a lot of audiences today, they might not know who some of these artists are, right? And you have to kind of remind them of like what their hits were like in 1985,
Mhm.
1984. And because again, they were all sort of like huge at that time, all their hits were like very expensive to license, obviously. So we did come into that knowing that there would have to be a large music budget. But we knew that sort of the backbone of the film would be "We Are the World," right? The song "We Are the World." And I think having the involvement of someone like Lionel Richie obviously helps because um, he was able, he's close with everyone that was on the song, and he was able to help us in terms of like getting people on board with the music.
Mhm. Such a help. Now, of course, I have to ask this question because I'm always curious about the answer. Was there anything that was left in the edit that we did not get to see on screen?
Yeah, I mean, film is a liminal art form, right? So you can't make something that's it's infinite. And some of the things that were cut out, just because we wanted a very tight story and we wanted again to have the sense of like propulsion. There's a little bit more of the Prince scene that we cut out.
Mhm.
We want My first premonition when we were editing the film is like, oh, we're going to be stuck in the studio for so long, like it's going to feel like claustrophobic. Like Prince is sort of the only participant in the story that exists outside of that studio. And so I was like, okay, we're going to have like this little break from the studio and go out and see what Prince is doing that night and see more of it. I mean, there is already a scene of Prince in the film, but we realized like the footage in the room is such gold that you didn't need to step away from it. You want to constantly be in that room with all these participants and all these icons, and so we kind of like cut out a bit of the Prince of it all, and I think the film is better for that.
I'm sure Prince fans at home are like, oh, because they always want more Prince content. Well, is there anything else that we didn't talk about? Because I'm sure there's so much that you can think about with this title. I mean, it's literally the greatest thing in pop. So anything that we didn't mention in my questions?
I think your questions like really led me to think about a lot more than like it opened up my mind to talk about a lot more. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Um, I mean, it was such a privilege to be able to like step into this world as filmmakers, especially working in documentary. Like I often love working in documentary because sometimes I'm doing a film in a place that I have no business belonging in, and so to like be part of of We Are the World and that history in a way, and for Lionel and all these participants of this song and soloists to let me into those experiences really magical. And we shot a lot of we're actually, yeah, like 99% of the interviews were actually shot in the actual studio where it happened. So for me, it was important just to like kind of feel that spiritual energy of like the place where it happened. But I you know, realized this night was almost 40 years ago. People might forget, they're in their 70s and 80s. I could hardly remember what happened to me last week. And so it was important for me for people to step back into that room and remember it and let the memories kind of fade, or not fade, but really flood back into their consciousness. And that was an important decision. And I think we wouldn't have the end line of the film where Lionel talks about returning home unless we actually shot the interview at A&M Studios. So um, that was a nice place to be able to again be part of this project.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing quite a bit of the behind the scenes of the process. And of course, this movie is behind the scenes of the greatest night in pop. So thank you for sharing about your process. It's just really been eye opening. I also want to thank everybody at home for tuning into this Q&A. I hope you enjoyed the movie. I hope you're going to share it with your friends and your family. And I'm sure they will love it as much as I do. We hope to see you at another screening for Doc NYC's Spring Showcase. And Bao, once again, thank you for being with us here today.
Thanks so much for having me.